All right, everybody. Give me a second. We're doing a quick and comprehensive, which is the way I prefer, interview here, talking about the market for next year. For those that are watching this live, feel free to engage. But hopefully this will be a good back and forth with my friend, Mr. Will Rhind, talking about 2025 outlook. My name is Michael Gayed. This is the High Conviction Podcast. And this is my friend and an overall good guy, Mr. Will Rhind of GraniteShares, who's had a hell of a year. Will, we're doing this because we want to get some of your thoughts here on what happens next to markets. I think everyone correctly assumes that pretty much this year, 2024, is in the books. So we've had two incredibly strong years for equities, especially obviously on the large cap side. What's the outlook from your perspective as far as how next year looks?
Yeah, look, I think that the stage has been set really for another positive year next year. A lot of excitement about the prospect of a new President Trump administration or a new 4-year term. And specifically, I think the impact of some of the policies around deregulation that will affect financial markets and stocks more broadly. So the impact of Elon Musk, the Doge project, and other things, I think, sets the stage. Economy-wise, from a macro perspective, continues to do well. Earnings continue to be strong, as we've just seen coming off of this third quarter earnings cycle, particularly for big tech, which again, performed very well. And I think what we've heard from the Federal Reserve is that they will continue to cut interest rates, albeit at a pace that is sort of moderated, given the fact that we've seen economic data continue to be pretty strong. I think retail sales, already we have some of the numbers. Again, always a bit of a bifurcated market, particularly after COVID, but broadly speaking, there are retailers that are doing well in this particular season. So that's a good sort of barometer of the strength of the consumer. So overall, I think the macro patterns that we've experienced this year will continue next year. In other words, inflation coming down, interest rates coming down and moderating around a healthy level. We see strength from the consumer, continued strength from the consumer. And I think with the backdrop of deregulation and other sort of more business-friendly policies, we see another positive year for markets.
Yes, and I will say that I do think that I agree. I do think that the liquidity is going to keep on pushing things in general. And aside from the monetary side, to your point about deregulation, all that inherently is another way of putting liquidity in the system, as well as actual liquidity through tax cuts. That's a good sort of pivot into different sectors that probably benefit from what's coming as far as maybe another wave of liquidity. You mentioned consumers, you mentioned tech. Tech probably does continue because that is sort of the go-to area for most people when they want to play for liquidity. But outside of tech, is there anything else that you're eyeing that could be interesting?
Yeah, I think just one thing to say before we jump into the sectors is, of course, there's still a huge amount of cash sitting on the sidelines that was sitting pretty in money market funds, longer dated accounts earning high levels of interest. And as interest rates come down, that will be, I think, another tailwind as that money moves off the sidelines into markets seeking a higher return. So you mentioned tech. I think tech is really the most important sector for next year as we think about the impact of Elon Musk, particularly the government, the pro-AI type policies that we expect to come into place, deregulation. So tech, I think, will be the big winner from next year. And we've already seen some evidence of that, clearly with stocks rallying after the election result. And so outside of tech, I think we can look to other sectors of the market, such as financials, that could benefit from deregulation, industrials, also these sectors which are sort of America first, so to speak, sectors, more domestic utilities, manufacturing, etc., that could also benefit. But I think tech really steals the show for me in terms of the leading cryptocurrency. I put kind of within that tech umbrella, but clearly is differentiated from the large, Mag 7 tech companies.
I remember when Trump was first running, there was this whole sort of mantra of drill, baby, drill when it came to oil. And that, I think it's clear that the Republicans tend to favor the energy industry and oil sector in general. I wonder how you think that might impact ESG type investments, how might it impact the EV sector?
I mean, some of the noise is coming out already from members of the transition team. I was definitely speaking to deregulation on the energy front, so unlocking protected areas, etc., for drilling. So it seems like, just like last time, in a way, of course, when Trump was president 8 years ago, that energy production, when the US became obviously a net exporter of energy, is going to be an important priority. And again, for the consumer, lower gas prices is always, something which goes down well politically. So I think we're going to see some of the same thing, which is good for consumers, but not necessarily good for investors of energy stocks.
You mentioned industrials, defense, part of that, obviously, and shipbuilding. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around Trump putting pressure on Europe, for example, in terms of their defense spending versus the U.S. Any thoughts on sort of where that particular part of the industrial sector might go?
Yeah, I think, again, that's the million-dollar question at this stage, is the impact of the tariff policies and how that exactly plays out. Obviously, a huge amount of speculation about the numbers involved, i.e. the percentage numbers for different industries. But I think, broadly speaking, I would expect it to be something similar to what happened last time. And the playbook for that clearly remained in place after Trump had left office and under the Biden administration. So with some tweaking here or there, I think, broadly speaking, that will remain kind of in place and won't be perhaps as negative as some of the detractors are saying.
Let's go outside the U.S. for a moment, because the reality is it's very U.S.-centric momentum. International largely has not done that well. You can argue a lot of areas are slowing down and maybe entering recession. Any particular thoughts or insights when it comes to South Korea in particular? Obviously, those markets have had a bit of a hard time, especially more recently here. But what's your outlook there?
That's right. I think, again, for markets like South Korea, that's going to be largely dependent on these tariff policies and how that impacts, for example, the automotive industries, the battery industries, which are very important kind of components to that particular country's economy. So I think we'll have to see really what materializes on that front. But I think what we perhaps know already is that there could be some positives in, for example, areas like shipbuilding, where Trump has made some positive comments about aligning interests on shipbuilding, and perhaps also other sectors of the market like defense, where we expect to see clearly more domestic focus or focus in the US along with strategic partners. So I think that there's a bit of a mixed market here, and we'll have to see really the impact of tariffs again on the domestic battery and EV or automotive industries more broadly. But there will be some bright spots, and I think, broadly speaking, investors are really should be focused on the US economy and the other sort of particular sectors that will be doing well in this, or we expect to do well next year, such as big tech.
Right, which again, obviously South Korea's markets tend to have a lot of tech. That tech has performed very differently than tech in the U.S., and a large part of that, as we know, is the AI revolution. Any closing thoughts or final things that come to mind? I mean, I think South Korea in particular gets to be interesting just because, if anything, there's always a friend-shoring dynamic. Yes, it's America first from a Trump perspective, but it's never going to go to that extreme the way his rhetoric seems to suggest. But any closing thoughts here?
Look, I think the closing thought has to be one of optimism that we're coming off the back of a great year for markets. There's a lot of optimism going into next year in a way that I haven't seen in a while, to be honest with you. That it seems like a lot of the skepticism that we saw, a lot of the bearish talk, particularly at the beginning of the year, where, let's not forget, people were talking about an imminent collapse of the market in many cases, that never materialized. I think there's a lot of optimism about what could happen next year, and that's optimism around the shape of the economy, about the performance of some of our, best companies, on the tech side, America's AI strategy, and clearly what that means for, market leaders such as NVIDIA, AMD, etc. And then the pro-crypto policies that have been a big part of the election rhetoric from both sides, but clearly under President Trump, that will expect to continue, with Bitcoin hitting $1,000 per Bitcoin. So from that perspective, I think one of optimism and something to look forward to next year. My particular view is that big tech is really the standout for me next year, and particularly with Elon Musk being so involved with the US government, that you have to think that is going to be beneficial to the sector. And even with famous figures such as Jeff Bezos, who perhaps in the past has had somewhat of a complicated relationship with Donald Trump, now talking very positively, constructively, saying he'll do whatever it takes to help President Trump, particularly on the AI front. So overall, positive message, and looking forward to next year.
And I'm looking forward to that as well, not only because of the growth of GraniteShares, but also because I think the GraniteShares Substack at graniteshares.substack.com is going to be a great resource for those looking for ideas in terms of how to think through what comes next. Always a pleasure, Will, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.